Pastor's Perspective for Wednesday, March 11th, right? Yeah, March 11th, 2026. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. If you've got a question, maybe you're wondering, what does the Bible say about this? Or what does the Bible say about that? Or maybe it's not in the Bible. So what biblical principles can you use to answer the dilemma or the question that you find yourself in? Well, give us a call. We're going to be here until 4 o'clock today at 888-564-6173. We're here every weekday, Monday through Friday from 3 to 4 Pacific to answer the questions you have as you read your Bible every day or listen to Bible studies on the radio here or maybe even at your own church. And you just wonder, hi, I'd like more insight on this. Can you provide it? Yes, we can try at least. 888-564-6173 is our number. And here to answer your questions today, we've got Brian Brodersen from echoesofmercy.com. He's also a teaching pastor at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. Sunday nights at 6:30 is his gig, but he's also doing something tonight, right?
Something tonight, yeah. We have, I think, three times a year we do, it's like almost kind of like more of a classroom, school type of a environment where we have a number of different classes that are offered on a variety of subjects. You know, some of them are books of the Bible and some of them are, we have one class that's on how to handle your finances, a class that is, looking at, let's say, current events and issues from a biblical perspective and so forth. And I tend to do most of my courses on some aspect of church history. Mm-hmm. And so I've done a number of sessions on church history. And this time around, I'm doing, it's kind of, it's more like biographical sketches versus looking at periods of time in church history. So, yes, so tonight I'm actually concluding tonight with C.S. Lewis, and then my wife Cheryl will do the final class next Wednesday night, and she told me who she's going to do, and I don't remember who she said. So...
Cheryl, if you're listening, call in and let us know.
Yeah, so I'll figure it out by tonight, and then when I get there, I'll tell everybody, this is what's happening next week. So
maybe you'll figure it out by 3:58, and then you can tell all of us.
No, yeah. But I don't even think anybody will know who she is anyway, because she's in this thing right now where she's doing these amazing women on Women Worth Knowing that have done extraordinary things globally, but yet nobody really knows them today, So like the last couple that she's done, I just was so fascinated by these stories, and yet I'd never heard of these women myself. So figure if I haven't heard of them, then there's probably a lot of people out there that have not heard of them as well. Yeah, but it's all good. So that's what's happening.
Very good. So that's this Sunday, or the history. The C.S. Lewis is tonight.
Tonight, yes,
6:30 at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.
What a fascinating story! I just, I love C.S. Lewis, and I've read a lot of his own literature, but I've also read a number of biographies on him, and his conversion story is it's extraordinary.
Yeah,
and it reminds me over and over again. I think I said this yesterday. It just reminds me of the uniqueness in which God deals with individual people.
Did you learn something new this time as you were studying, or is it more of a review, do you think?
Yeah, did I learn anything new? Let me think. Not so much. I got some clarification on some, just some of his thinking and ideas about things. But as far as the story goes, it's pretty much the story that I've known. Mm-hmm. A scholar named Alistair McGrath wrote a book a few years ago on Lewis. He wrote a biography on Lewis. And they have a very interesting kind of similar backgrounds. They're both from Northern Ireland. They're both Oxford people. Alistair McGrath is a professor at Oxford. Anyway, so in his biography, he concludes that Lewis got the date of his conversion wrong. And so he goes about to correct that. And I'm not sure that he got it right, but he swears that Lewis got it wrong. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So you write a biography, Brian, and then when you're dead, I'll correct it. I'll come along and say, well, no, Brian said he said it was this week, but no, it actually wasn't that week.
That's
and
right.
This is why,
yes.
Because I remember that week.
I remember. I was there, yes. That C.S. Lewis biography, by the way, that Pastor Brian's referring to by Alistair McGrath is called C.S. Lewis, A Life.
Yes.
Eccentric Genius, Reluctant Prophet. Yeah. That was the title I was going to use for my bio, but I guess I can't now. Eccentric Genius, Reluctant Prophet. Okay.
How about Reluctant Genius, Eccentric Prophet? How about,
okay.
How about if we
That'll
switch
work.
it around a little bit?
Love it. Thank you.
Because you always resist, when we want to refer to you as the genius that you are. You never let us,
Because it ain't true. All right. 888.
You're a radio genius.
564-6173. I have radio personality disorder. Somebody told me.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Well, I don't know if it's
You got a good case of it.
Yes. By the way, Pastor's Perspective is sponsored by the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University, and you can join pastors and church leaders from across the country for a time of renewal and encouragement. Anchored is a conference happening in May, hosted by the Talbot School of Theology, focused on hope-filled faith and thoughtful engagement with today's world. You can learn more at biola.edu/anchored. K-Wave. You can also go to the kwave.com events page because we've got a link for it on there. 888-564-6173 is our number. And before we go to the phones, let's answer a question that was sent in online. This is from Dan in Santa Ana, who writes, and he listens to us on the K-Wave app, by the way. Dan writes, "Hello, pastors. I wanted to ask you what your honest thoughts are on Reformed theology. This would include Calvinism, covenant theology, and confessionalism, that is, adhering to a confession like the Westminster Standards or the three forms of unity. Thank you so much." Brian, what do you say to Dan?
Well, he asked for an honest, right? An honest...
honest thoughts, yes. Can't make this up.
My honest... I don't myself... adhere to the Reformed view. There's a lot of places where, there's overlap, and I would believe the same things that many Reformed people do. When it comes to, sort of the classic tulip, the 5 points of Calvinism, which are common whether you're Reformed or Calvinist or covenant, I do not believe in those points the way they're defined. There are many historically. My goodness, there's so many wonderful, amazingly used Christian leaders who have been Reformed in their theology. So I don't want to really necessarily be critical of it. There's just points, where you disagree. I think the two great examples from history from the 18th century, you have John Wesley and George Whitefield. They were disagreed strongly over the ideas of election and things like that. But they, God used them both in extraordinary ways. And another person who was a devout Calvinist was Martin Lloyd-Jones back in the last century. And he was such a proponent of Reformed theology that people would assume that he would have a real critical perspective on somebody, say, like John Wesley. And yet when he was asked the question about Wesley's Arminianism, or however people would phrase it, he would say, well, look, God used Wesley in an extraordinary way, kind of like I'm saying. He didn't agree with his soteriology, which is a doctrine of salvation, but he knows that God used him extraordinarily. So what he ended up saying, which I have kind of latched onto over the years, if God wasn't bothered and chose to use John Wesley and George Whitefield in equally extraordinary ways, then I'm not going to be bothered about it either. So that's my honest
That is your honest. It sounded pretty honest to
take
me.
on
Yes.
it.
So, Dan, hope that answers your question. Thanks for sending it in today on, or through, I should say, the Pastor's Perspective page at kwave.com, which you can easily get to if you scan the QR code there, if you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram.
And just a note,
Yes.
C.S. Lewis was not a Calvinist, and Alistair McGrath is.
Oh, okay. So, do you think that swayed the way he wrote the book?
No.
I would hope not. Okay.
No, it didn't.
Okay.
Not at all.
888-564-6173 is the number to call us today.
So we're looking down this hallway here. What are we getting?
Digital
on a
highway.
Spaceship or what?
I don't know if they can see that on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram right now. But yeah, we're trying to connect to our guest who's joining us online, and hopefully we will have him here shortly. But the crew is working on that. In the meantime, let's take a phone call. How about we go to Lisa?
You know what? Let me just say one thing.
Oh, sure. Lisa, you're next. Don't hang up.
As I was leaving the house today, Cheryl said, you know, it's really good that people are not going to see how you're dressed because you look like a really old person.
What?
Yeah, that's what she said. And I said, well, for the record, I am old, but I thought I looked pretty good today.
I don't see anything. What
Well, it's my
specifically?
shorts. She was really.
Oh, you're wearing shorts.
She's
Okay,
really-
I can't see that.
Yeah, for some reason, these shorts, you know, she just was not.
I thought maybe you had your pants hiked up all the way to your, I don't know. Oh, look, I see someone. There he is.
Okay.
It's Professor Eric Tanis from the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. Hey there, Eric. How are you, sir?
Good to see you.
So good to have you on. Can you hear us? Can you see us and all that?
Yes.
Yay. So what's new? It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, things are going really well. Very thankful.
Great. And we're thankful that you were able to connect and because Pastor Brian needs to go home and change clothes because his wife Cheryl isn't happy with how he's dressed today.
Well, she just said she was glad that the camera was not going to be, focusing on my shorts.
Yes.
I see.
Not because they're shorts. It's just because it's the style that she did it like. You would
Okay.
think I was wearing like dolphin shorts or something.
Is there another camera that can capture the? No, we're not gonna. Don't want to see that.
So hi, Eric. I don't think
Hey, Brian.
I don't think we've ever met.
I think we were on together a long time ago.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, you look familiar, but yeah, because Brian told me that you had been on the program at least once before, but I was probably.
Oh,
out of
you
town.
weren't there that day, come to think of it. There was
Yeah.
another pastor remotely that was on with us.
Okay.
But yes, you were the star that was not present that day.
Yeah. Okay. So it must have been back in the Bobby era.
I think it was Bobby, actually.
Bobby Conway.
Bobby Conway joining us online. Eric was here in the studio with me, and now he's joining us online. But Bobby is not in the studio with us. So, yeah, we'll make it all make sense. So, yes, Eric is a professor of theology at the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. He's also a teaching pastor, an elder at Grace Evangelical Free Church in La Mirada, not far from Biola. They're on Santa Gertrudis Avenue. So,
Oh.
how's that going, Eric?
Really well. Super healthy church, real family. It's wonderful. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, my mom lives just right down the road from you guys.
She
so,
does.
Yeah, yeah. So
I'd like to meet her.
Santa Gertrudis, that was the that gave it away. It's like, wait, that's by my mom's house.
What's the nearest cross street there? Santa Gertrudis and
Imperial Highway.
okay.
And
Okay, yeah.
Rosecrans.
Yep.
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 Yeah, you're right. You are right down the street from the school, then, huh?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
How long has your mom lived there?
Oh gosh, my mom's lived there since I think she moved there when I was 18 or 20. Yeah,
Okay.
18, I think. Yeah, so that was a long time ago. I forget how many years? 50?
Something like that, yeah.
51.
Because there used to be a Security Pacific Bank on the corner of Imperial and Santa Gertrudis.
Okay, yeah, well, she didn't live
And I used to work there.
You used to, oh my
Yes,
God. Wow, we got all
yes,
kinds
so,
of
yeah.
nostalgia going
Trivia,
here.
nostalgia, yes, all that.
And one more, Eric, I saw that you did your undergrad in Connecticut. Are you from Connecticut?
I am. First 28 years, my wife and I are from Connecticut.
Oh, that's
I just
great.
was there 2 days ago,
Were you really?
visiting my mother.
Okay. Well, my daughter lives in Sherman, Connecticut, and my oldest daughter does. They recently moved from Katona, New York to Sherman, Connecticut, and my youngest daughter is planning to move there as well. So we'll have 2 daughters and 4 grandkids in Connecticut.
Yes, in the Nutmeg State.
I love Connecticut. I think it's amazing. It's a great place.
Especially at Christmas time?
Well, I was there at Christmas. Yeah, you know, we did the Connecticut Christmas in Connecticut thing. It was amazing.
Yes.
Is it still snow patches around?
It was classic New England when we were there last week. Freezing rain, snow, rain, back and forth. It was great.
Right.
Sounds lovely. Meanwhile, here in Orange County,
Yes.
sunny and
The endless
75,
summer.
80.
Yeah.
The endless summer. Okay, let's answer some phone calls. Lisa in Inglewood, thank you for calling 888-564-6173. What did you want to ask Brian and Eric?
Okay, so my friend, we've been having this debate. He says that all angels are Caucasian and they're male and female.
And you say?
I said, show it to me in the Bible.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to come up with your own. No, they're not. They're this and that. But Eric, what do you think?
Well, angels are one of those things that I think a lot of even Christians have learned a lot more about from art in the history of the church or figurines you buy in gift shops than actually from the Bible. And I remember when I think about 19, I thought, I wonder what the Bible actually teaches about angels. And so I did an extensive study on angels, and I was amazed how many things I believed about angels are nowhere in the Bible. And so I discarded some of those beliefs, and other things that are maybe in the Bible, I might still believe, but far less than I used to. Things like everyone has their very own guardian angel sorts of things. And certainly a little fairy-looking lapel angel that you wear that helps you find your keys. You know what angels have to say when they meet someone? Fear not, because they're terrifying, actually, when they manifest themselves in sense perceptible ways. And so, you know, the Precious Moments angel doesn't quite capture the biblical picture. I don't think a Precious Moments angel would ever have to say, fear not. Rather, do you have a tissue? Because I'm crying. But it's amazing to me how much we have, like chubby baby angels. None of that is in the Bible. And I do think that when angels who are spiritual beings, you know, there are 3 kinds of persons: divine persons, angelic persons, and human persons. So angels are personal beings, but they're spiritual beings like God. The Son, since the incarnation, takes on a body, but the Father and the Spirit never do. And so angels are able to manifest their presence with sense perceptible means that's created so that we can perceive their presence. Otherwise, to attribute embodied realities to them, like race or like gender for that matter, really doesn't fit the biblical picture. Now, I will say we don't have one instance of a female angel. And race is never something that is highlighted in angels, or really people barely in the Bible. That's just not a major defining issue like it tends to be for us in our culture. And so angels, I don't think, have inherent sexuality, even though the names used to address them are male in the Bible. And that makes me assume that the appearance of an angel, when it manifests itself in sense perceptible ways, is a male appearance that goes with that male name.
Brian, what do you think?
Well, I'm just so glad Eric made it on and that he has done such a deep dive into angels, because I just learned more about angels from that 5 minutes than I think I've ever known. So that was fantastic. That was a great answer. I do wonder though, not to get into the gender thing, because I think they're genderless as well. But I wonder even about the names. So we think of Michael as a male name, or Gabriel, for example. But those are names that really are kind of Michael is who is like God. But I guess the pronouns referring to those angels are male. So okay, right. So anyway, I was just thinking off the top of my head, trying to make some contribution to this great question. But I think Eric did a great job.
Could it be that society...
And even the name angel, it means a messenger. So
right,
the key is where you're heading with that answer, Brian, to who is God. They're representative of God.
Right.
And so not to focus on the angel, but the one they're representing really is the key.
Yeah. And Lisa, I think that your response was a good one, in the sense that you said, show me in the Bible. Because we're absolutely certain that none of those things are going to be able to, be shown from Scripture.
Right.
Okay. Did angels procreate?
Well, there are some people who believe that they do, based on Genesis chapter 6. And that's a long-standing, debate between Christians and scholars. I was just listening to a conversation the other day on kind of a newer book on the topic of, angels and demons and so forth. And, these guys were very, they weren't dogmatic about it, but the assumption for them was, yes, somehow angels and humans, or spirit beings and humans, back in Genesis chapter 6, that is what's being talked about there. Eric, how much did you dive into the Nephilim and all of that when you were studying?
It's all those books in his library back there. They're all on the Nephilim.
Yeah, let me go get one now. I don't put the Nephilim in sort of a strict angelic category, because they are a very hard to understand and explain, sort of hybrid almost of physical beings, but also with a real spiritual aspect to them. So I don't think I would include them in my understanding of angels in general. Mm-hmm. And so just my simple answer to that question is no, because they are embodied beings. I think they have creative ability, but not a procreative ability like we do in conception and bearing children and so forth.
Yeah.
Lisa, thanks for calling in today to Pastor's Perspective at 888-564-6173. We'll go from Englewood to Downey and speak with Elva, who's listening on FM 107.9 K-Wave. Hi, Elva. What's your question for Eric and Brian today?
Hi, good afternoon, pastors. I don't know if I'm going to ask this question correctly, but the Christians believe that we have one God in three persons, right?
Right.
And Jews believe there is only one God.
Right.
So then how do they reconcile those verses in the Old Testament when it says, "And the Spirit of God came upon me"? Do they believe that God has a soul, or what do they understand by the Spirit of God, if it's just one God?
Eric, what say you?
Spirit, or how do they?
So I think an important starting point for us as Christians is to affirm thoroughgoing monotheism along with Muslims and Jews. So we are part of those great monotheistic traditions, unlike Eastern religions, that affirm that there is one God. Now, many Jews and Muslims will accuse us of being polytheists or tritheists, that because we believe Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are equally God, that we must believe in three gods. And so we're monotheists, and we're also Trinitarian monotheists. And the main reason we explain that is because we believe Father, Son, and Spirit equally possess the same divine nature. We don't believe there's anything but one divine nature, equally possessed by Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so I think when we talk to Jews or Muslims, monotheists, we should lead with our monotheism. So there's no mistake that we affirm there's one God. Even the Bible says the demons believe there's one God and shudder. So the demons are monotheists. They recognize the accuracy of saying there's one God. And so we believe there's one God in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, who eternally exist with the equality of their divine natures, but distinct in the way they relate to each other and the way they function primarily. And when it comes to the Old Testament, I don't think we have a full-blown Trinitarian doctrine in the Old Testament. I do think we have an amazing foundation in the Old Testament that comes from references to the Spirit, for instance, but also over and over again, a plurality within who God is, with the plural pronouns God uses for himself, with the angel of the Lord, which is representing God, but in some ways no different than Yahweh, with a reference to the Messiah as God in the Old Testament. But I think that lays the foundation. So by the time we get to the New Testament and see the Trinitarian nature of God expressed in redemption, it makes sense when you see the foundation in the Old Testament. I don't think Abraham, for instance, had a fully formed doctrine of the Trinity the way we do since the coming of the Son and the coming of the Spirit at Pentecost. But I think when he got to heaven, he probably said something like, I knew there was something like that going on. And when he got the fuller understanding of what he knew in a foundational way.
Yeah, and that I think Abraham is such a good reference point to, Eric, because, you know, the story of the visitation. Yahweh comes to Abraham. Three men come to Abraham, and one of them is clearly Yahweh. And then, of course, this is all preceding the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah that's going to take place. And then when the actual event of the destruction comes, it says that Yahweh, who is there on earth, rained down fire from Yahweh in heaven. So you have Yahweh on earth and you have Yahweh in heaven. So like you said, Eric, there's not a full-blown Trinitarian doctrine that is clearly laid out in Old Testament, but I think there are hints all the way through that there is a plurality within the divine nature that Jesus will clarify when he comes.
Yeah, one theologian I read compares the Old Testament portrayal to walking into a room and the lights aren't on, but you can make out a couch over here and a desk over here. And so when the lights come on, you didn't know exactly what was there, but you weren't surprised when you saw it. And I think that's a helpful way to think about it. I do think emphasizing the clarity that comes with the incarnation, the coming of the Messiah, is very important. And you think, well, why would God not make it more explicit in the Old Testament? Well, if the ways we see the distinctions between the Father, Son, and the Spirit are primarily in the way they relate to one another and function together, when that functioning and relating goes to high gear in redemption and the sending of the Son, it makes sense we would see Father, Son, and Spirit on display in a far greater way than we had before.
Does this help you, Elva?
Okay. Yes, very much. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Thank you for calling in today to Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. We're going to be here for another half hour. It's plenty of time for you to call in and ask your question. We've got Eric Thomas, a professor of theology at the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. He's also an elder, a teaching pastor at Grace Evangelical Free Church in La Mirada. Pastor Brian Broderson is here as well, so call in, 888-564-6173. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, you can call in too. We've got the number posted right there on the bottom of your screen. You'll also see a QR code. You can scan that, and that'll take you to the Pastor's Perspective page at kwave.com where you can submit a question. We may not see that question today. We likely will not see that question today. So if you want an answer today, call in today to 888-564-6173. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. are back on Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. Faith isn't about winning fights, it's about seeking truth with integrity. Talbot Apologetics helps you make a compelling case while building meaningful connections. Make a case, love your neighbor. Learn more at biola.edu/apologetics. K-Wave. Speaking of Biola and Talbot, we've got Eric Tanas here. He's a professor of theology there, answering your questions today till 4 o'clock. So call in to 888-564-6173. He's also a teaching pastor at Grace EV Free in La Mirada. Here in the studio with me is Brian Broderson from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and echoesofmercy.com. So here's a question that was sent in online. Actually, I'm going to read two of them because they're both on the same topic. Damon and Aliso Viejo writes, growing up, I had one view of Israel. Throughout the years, that opinion has changed in a negative way. Is there a clear and distinct separation between who Israel was biblically and who they are now politically? And then Zoriah writes, I am so confused. How do we get behind Israel, like it says in the Bible, when it calls for the killing of human beings? How do we justify another war for Israel's sake? Every war in the past 7 years has had an Israeli interest. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee has purchased our government, says Zoriah. Please help me understand, because as a Christian woman, I am utterly confused. Is this just the beginning of the end? So, Brian, what do you say to Damon and Zoriah?
Wow. These kinds of questions are becoming more frequent for sure. Regarding the first question, so you have this nation that God brings into existence. Essentially, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the fathers of the nation, and God gives to them this promise of worldwide redemption and restoration through their seed. So God says to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, through your seed, all of the nations of the earth will be blessed. And then we launch into the life of this family. This family becomes a nation. And it's through this nation that God is going to bring, ultimately, the Savior into the world, the Messiah. And he has come to save them because they need saving just like everybody else does. The angel declared to Mary or to Joseph, that they were to name the child Jesus, for he would save his people from their sins. So that would very specifically refer to the nation of Israel. But he is the seed through whom all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed, so the gospel is going to go beyond the nation. Now, the nation rejects the Messiah for the most part, and God, as he declared in the prophets, he set them aside as a favored nation. And so that's been the condition of Israel from the first century. The destruction of the temple in 70 AD through the Romans, kind of was like the final, kind of just sealed the whole thing for Israel's future destiny. But all throughout the prophets and Jesus himself and even the apostles, specifically Paul in Romans 9 through 11, declares that there is a future restoration for Israel. So in 1948, after almost 2,000 years of roaming the earth, Jews still lived in the land, but a very small portion of them, but the majority of the Jewish population lived outside of the land for almost 2,000 years. And in 1948, they came back and reestablished themselves as a nation. Thus, we have the modern state of Israel. And I think, as biblical people, we recognize that God is doing something in that. But God is sovereignly doing something in that. It doesn't mean that we have to support or agree with every policy of Israel or any of that. They are a modern nation state. They are a political entity. and so forth. So we might disagree with that. I think as Christians, and not all Christians agree on this, but I think as Christians, we look, I just wrote an article, we talked about it yesterday, that God is ultimately going to send Jesus back, and he's going to reign as the king of the Jews. He's going to sit on the throne of David in Jerusalem. He's going to rule over the house of Jacob. That's what the angel said he would do, and that is in the future. So now, in the meantime, we see what's happening, and some of it we recognize is okay. There are problems with that, just like there are problems with any nation in any war. And in other cases, we look on and think, well, as hard as that is, anybody who has sympathy toward the Islamic regime of Iran either is just not really thinking clearly about it, or has some other, kind of a diabolical perspective, because this regime has wreaked havoc on their own people, and much of the world through terrorism. Mm-hmm. So, and there's much more that could be said on this, but Eric, you want to jump in and add anything to that?
Think great answer, Brian. I would only add that there's a lot of overlap, but it is important, as you said, to distinguish between the political realities and the theological realities. So politically, I can understand why someone would say, well, we're just fighting a war on behalf of Israel. Well, Iran refers to the United States as the big Satan and Israel as the little Satan. Mm-hmm. So there is a perspective on who we are that we need to just be honest about and actually allow them to have integrity with what they actually believe and not try to make them see us more positively than they do. They would love for both Israel and the United States to be completely obliterated. So I think there's a political issue to deal with. And I think you explained the covenant perspective very helpfully. God chose to use a nation of Israel to bring about the revelation of who he is, but also his redemptive purposes that led to the coming of the Messiah. When the Messiah comes, Gentiles are grafted into the people of God. Now, there's always been ethnic Israel, and there's always been true Israel, the faithful remnant. Even within the political ethnic reality, there's been the people of God within that broader ethnic category. So I think it's important to draw that distinction as well. But Gentiles, by faith in the Messiah, are grafted in to the true people of God, and now we are heirs of the kingdom with them. But Paul wants to make sure we Gentiles recognize what we owe to the covenant people that we've been grafted into. And at the same time, like you said, doesn't mean we give carte blanche to anything political Israel does, which is largely a secular state. Yeah. And so it's not the Israel that the covenant points to. And I agree with you. And this is one of the things we're holding to at Biola and Talbot is a future for ethnic Israel that includes a wonderful inbringing of ethnically Jewish people, but now who are brought back in by faith in the Messiah. So the Messiah really is the issue, what we do with him. And I do think there should be a sympathy and recognition of the horrific demonic anti-Semitism throughout history toward the Jewish people that I think is clearly demonic and is on the rise. And at the same time, recognize that it's a miracle Israel even still exists in any identifiable way. The small little nation of people and the influence they've had is just astounding. And so I see God's hand at work where I don't just agree with anything and everything Israel does, and at the same time have an understanding biblically that there is a place for the Jewish people in God's final plan.
And I think too, I mean, this is a little more political, but I think, we are allies with Israel. They have been the one real sort of democratic type of a country, similar to the U.S. in the Middle East. And if you just look at a map, it's a very small piece of land with about I think the total Jewish population in the world right now is about 12 million, and not all 12 million live in the land. I think there's like 8 million Jews that live in the land, and the rest of the population is made up of Arabs and, people who identify as Palestinians and other things. But I think, part of the U.S. is Israel kind of uniting on this. It centers around this radical form of Islam that is bent on the destruction of, as Eric said, the U.S., the great Satan, and Israel, the little Satan, and pretty much all of Western civilization. The Iranian regime, they believe that there is this Mahdi, this 12th Imam that is going to come. It's kind of like a replacement for the second coming of Jesus. They believe that he's going to come and set up an Islamic kingdom globally. And the way that that's going to come about is as the world is plunged into chaos, he comes to sort out the chaos. So the leaders in Tehran feel like it's their job to create the chaos in order to get the Mahdi to return. So, this is a complicated, it's a political, it's a geopolitical, but it is a theological issue as well. And who would have ever, dreamed that the things that are going on globally actually do have a theological and a spiritual connection to them. And I think we would recognize that because we understand from Scripture that is the reality, that there is a spiritual dimension that largely influences and in some senses controls the current, political kind of thing and so forth. So,
Damon and Zariah, thank you so much for sending in your questions through the Pastor's Perspective page at kwave.com. Well, that's how Damon got his question to us. Zariah used the Pastor's Perspective Facebook Messenger. Thanks for sending those in.
Eric, I was recently, obviously this is all fresh on our minds, almost daily. Not just since a week ago, but going all the way back to October 7th and even before that. But I was just thinking of it in a way that I'd never thought about it before. How and you said, the existence of Israel is in and of itself. I think it's a miracle if you really, really think about the history. And there was a book written a number of years ago. I can't remember the author. But it wasn't even written by a Christian. But he actually said in the book that the existence of the Jewish people were enough to prove the existence of God. He said because there's no real good human explanation for why these people even still exist as an identifiable people, having been driven from the land, having been unable to settle in any one specific place globally and so forth. But anyway, all that to say, I got to thinking, I was thinking about God's, his testimony in the world. And I was thinking, Israel is in the world as a testimony to the sovereignty of God. The church is in the world as a testimony to the love and the grace of God. But I thought there is really, if you think about it, there is kind of a double witness, even with Israel. I think there is a witness to the reality of a God.
Right. And to appreciate Paul's perspective where he says he would basically give up his salvation for the salvation of his people that he still recognized were a people God has his hands on.
Yeah.
It really is astounding.
Yeah. And Romans 9 through 11 is, every time I reread Romans 9 through 11, when I finish chapter 11, I'm like, okay, how is anybody missing what is being said here? I mean, I don't know how Paul could make it any clearer that, there is a future.
It may be helpful.
People.
I know this has gone for a while, but I think it's a pretty important issue. Two things I would just want to add. There's a lot of controversy among conservative people politically, a lot of whom are Christians right now, where regarding Israel, there's some very sharp disagreement among conservative politically and Christians regarding Israel. And Brian, you said that there are different traditions that don't necessarily hold the way you and I are talking right now. And I think that's important to acknowledge that there are some traditions that don't think there's a place for ethnic Israel in God's future plan. Like I said, we at Talbot do, which is why we have a Messianic Jewish Study Center and have a real concern for the Jewish people like we do. But there's a clashing of end time views in politics. So even the way you said Jesus is going to come back and establish his kingdom. There are some people who think we establish the kingdom and then Jesus comes back.
Yeah.
So that creates a very different perspective on politics and our engagement with society.
Yes.
And that is something a lot of conservatives these days are embracing. But then there's no place for Israel, and even a growing opposition to Israel that's confusing to a lot of Christians. And one of my hopes is that there will be a renewed interest in eschatology and end times teaching in the Bible without overdoing it. You know, we kind of binged on it in the 70s and got overly detailed and everything and made movies and sold books by overly speculating about the details. And I don't want that again. But I'm amazed at how many Christians have no interest in end time stuff because, you know, it's apocalyptic and Revelation, and so who cares? I'm really hoping this brings a renewed interest to end time teaching without doing it in cheesy ways.
As I mentioned, I posted an article yesterday on our website, calvarychapel.com, and essentially that is what I said. You know, we need to quit making the mistake of trying to be too specific in our understanding of, you know, the things that are going on around us. Obviously, yes, you know, Jesus is going to come back and the whole world is moving toward that ultimate climax. But it doesn't mean that everything that happens in the Middle East is a fulfillment of prophecy. And I think we need to be careful we need to stop saying that and just say, okay, this is just the way the world is going. And one day, yes, there will be prophecies that are being fulfilled, and I don't think anybody's going to have to work too hard to try to figure it out because it's going to be obvious.
That article that Pastor Brian wrote and published at calvarychapel.com is called The Middle East and the Mission of God. So find that at the top of calvarychapel.com. Here's someone who's interested in the end times. It's David in Rancho Cucamonga, listening on FM 107.9 K-Wave. Hey, David.
Hello.
Hi, what's your question for us?
Okay, when I called earlier, I couldn't find the verse, but I have it now. It's on Revelation 13:18.
All right.
The way it says, here is wisdom, let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. Okay, so my question is there nobody today who has enough understanding or wisdom to know who that is? Or are they sworn, or are they told by God maybe not to say? I don't know.
What do you think, Eric?
So I think Brian just really hit on it very well. I think we are commanded to be aware and know the signs of the times, realize the times in which we live, and be aware of what God says is going to happen without being overly confident and living in the world of speculation where we think for sure we've got it figured out. And I think Brian is so on the money when he says, I don't think it's going to be a big mystery when it's revealed. I mean, the word that we use for the Revelation apocalyptic literature means to be revealed. These things are revealed to us in unmistakable ways, although we live our lives in eager expectation of the return of Christ, longing for his return and being aware of signs of the times. But, I think of Christians living during World War II. I would have been pretty confident that Hitler was the Antichrist. And maybe I wouldn't have set some dates of Jesus' return, but if I'm putting my money on who the Antichrist is, it's going to be Hitler. And so
absolutely,
yes,
100%.
And he wasn't. So
right.
That makes me hedge my bets quite a bit and being overly confident on figuring out the end time realities, while at the same time taking seriously the command that we understand these things. And so when the Antichrist comes, I think God's people need to have discernment and sober attentiveness to what's going on so that we know how to help people, not to run for the hills, not to go buy a ranch and load up on ammo, but to be helpful to people in end time realities. That's got to be our goal, not being the ones who have it figured out, but being the ones who are helpful because we're aware of what God's planning to do.
And I think now, as I read those passages, and here's the mind who has wisdom. Let him calculate the number is 666. I think that's going to apply to the people that are there witnessing the situation at the time. I don't think we're not going to figure that out. And every attempt to figure it out in the past 50 years has been wrong. And so I think that, like I said, I think we just need to quit repeating the same mistakes of thinking we've got it all figured out and then making all these grand pronouncements about how it's going to go down, and then it doesn't go down that way, and then we have to go back to the drawing board. Mm-hmm. Maybe we ought to just calm down and say, okay, there's some of this stuff that we just, at the present moment, we don't know. But what we do know is that Jesus is going to come again. And so that's what we can bank on.
Yeah, and understanding the kind of literature we're dealing with in the Bible is very important. When we're reading Proverbs, we need to know we're reading Proverbs, which are not historical representations like the Gospel. So when we read apocalyptic literature, the point really is to sometimes give us a punch in the gut, sometimes give us great encouragement. And it uses imagery to do that. But the point is not to figure out every single detail of what that means in a corresponding historical reality. I mean, I remember hearing so many sermons of the locusts are Huey helicopters, yes, and the bear is Russia, and then the Soviet Union collapses, and we say, well, back to the drawing board. And it's embarrassing. Yeah. It's embarrassing when we're so confident.
And I think, Eric, like you alluded to, I think that the younger generation are just so, they're so leery of that type of a thing. They're just like, no, I don't even want to talk about it. Or if I'm going to talk about it, I don't even want to look at it in a futuristic sense. I'll just try to apply Revelation to, my life today and the church today. And I think there's some great application, but I think too, God does want us to have a perspective on the future. We just have to keep it under control.
Do you know some of the best end times emphasis I've seen has come out of the African American church experience, grounded in slaves understanding who Jesus is, and then writing Negro spirituals that say, swing low, sweet chariot, come for to carry me home. That there is an inability to think this is my permanent home. And so that makes us long for the return of Christ in a way we're commanded to. Yeah. But often, we'd rather have our milkshake first, and then have Jesus come back. And I am hoping. I remember there are good things about those emphases where my great-grandfather used to wake up in the morning and he'd look out the window and he'd say, maybe today.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe today. And that's the sort of anticipation I think God's people are called to have without making it about figuring out all the specifics.
Just incidentally, I just finished reading Revelation 2 days ago, just in my regular reading. And as I was once again in Revelation 17 and 18, I thought, okay, I used to think I know what this was talking about, and now I'm back around to I don't know what in the world this is talking about. So just have to wait for further information, But
I just finished reading Revelation last month, and I got to the end. I closed it, and I said, God is awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Jesus wins.
Yeah.
And God's not playing around.
Yeah.
Those are my big conclusions.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can focus on the details and forget, Jesus wins.
Yes.
And I'm in his family. Yay! That's the big conclusion.
Yeah, that is the ultimate conclusion, isn't it?
Yes. Great way to end today's show. David, thank you for your phone call, and everyone else who couldn't get on. So sorry. We'll be back tomorrow between 3 and 4. We open up the phone lines about 7 minutes before 3, and we would love to hear from you then. So if you don't have any plans tonight, come on out to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa to hear Pastor Brian teach about C.S. Lewis. That's at 6:30. And then Grace EV Free Church Church in La Mirada. What time are your services, Eric?
9 and 11.
9 and 11 on Sundays. Very good. Do you teach, or who's the teacher there?
We have a team. I preach on as part of a team. Yeah.
Got it. Very good. All right. And you can find out more about Grace EV Free Church. I had it up here earlier. Is this it? No, that's a church in Mississippi. That's not it. Okay. Do you know?
I think we're the only church called Grace. So.
Okay. Yeah, could be. Here we go.
There are a lot of them, yeah.
GraceEVFree.org. GraceEVFree.org. That's it. All right. God bless you guys. Thanks so much for watching.
Brian's mother lives.
Yes. Yeah, right down the street. All right. We'll talk to you next time here on Pastor's Perspective.